I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
I love to see my people partying with me, man. Good to see you, Black Brown, Sweet Nikita, Miss Rhonda. Hey, happy birthday, Miss J.
Peace. Welcome, everybody.
Rhea.
Come on
Sweet
in.
Cherie. Party with me all night long. Say what? That's right, baby.
Invite others to join you. It's getting started.
Hey, Janine. Well, guess what? Hey, when I see you, yeah, I get a little happy. Hey, Black Brown, I get a little happy when I see you. What? Baby, when I see you, yeah, I get a little happy. Hey, Francine, I get a little happy when you party with me. Well, guess what? When I see you, yeah. Hey, Jay, hey, Randy, I get happy when you party with me. Guess what? When I see you, yeah, yeah. Hey, Cole, I get a little happy. Happy when I see you. What? When I see you, yeah, yeah. Listen, fellas, I put your picture on my mirror. Start to blush when somebody says your name.
Peace. Welcome.
My stomach is a pain. See you walk in my direction, I go the other way. I start to stutter when I speak. Try to stand on my knees, go away. What's happening to me? Anybody can you tell me what it means? I lay my head on my pillow. He got me staring out the window. Wish on a star for a sign. That's the reason why. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hey, see you. Hey, Marlon, you sexy boy. Hey, oh no. When I see you. Hey, fellas, listen. I scribble X and O's on my notebook, checking how my hair and my nails look. I feel myself up in the zone. I get nervous when you call. Say I'm not home. See your face. I hear my favorite song. Should I send an email at home? I wonder if you know, or do you have a clue? Yeah, I lay my head on my pillow.
Welcome, everybody.
Wish on a star for a sign. That's the reason why. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
When I see you.
Marlon, so sexy boy.
Peace.
Oh, no.
And what you playing on that guitar, my man?
See you.
What's going on there?
Listen, something now is taking over me. Oh yeah. I'm not gonna run. I'm just gonna stand here and see. Oh yeah.
Oh wow. Not to be in your business, but where is it 3 a.m. right now?
When I see you. Hey, Fox, hold me down, listen. Well, guess what? When I see you, yeah. Hey, sweet Sanita. Hey.
It's 100%.
Hey, Janine.
Never fail. Underslept. A little bit sluggish today, but this is all I need right here.
When
what I like, what I like.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to I Mix What I Like. I'm Jared Ball. Happy to be your host. Please do all the things. Welcome, everybody. Please do check out DCVYBE Band if you are in the DC area or ever find yourself in the DC area. Great live show. They're still rocking, as good as ever. So please, avail yourself of that good time. Grown folks, go. But okay, so I'm very excited to get to the show. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring up our guest. Folks over on Black Liberation Media will for certain be familiar. On Wednesday evenings, Sister Cherie, part of Dare to Struggle podcast with Dr. Bunchy Shakur and some other dude.
Don't do my comrade like that.
Nah, man, my man Geechee, of course, Geechee, y'all. They do a great job. Enjoy the show. And so Cherie, welcome. It's good to see you and have you join us, at least for the first time on this show. Welcome.
Yes, peace, everyone. Happy to be here.
So my introduction is insufficient. If there's more you'd like to share, and just for anyone who might be under familiar, and let folks know a little bit more about what you do and who you are, and then we'll get to it.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, yeah, a lot of you already know me from Black Liberation Media on Dare to Struggle, Dare to Win. If you watch the show, you'll know that I'm always talking about cultural work because I identify as a cultural worker. My background is in theater and acting, but I also write. I produced a one-woman show last year that had a lot of stuff from Jared's book, actually. Like, that's what they read. I guess I've never actually talked to you directly about.
No, I've heard about that, and I've wanted to. I haven't seen the show. I would definitely like to. So anyway, but yeah.
But yeah, so that's my main form of expression. I was brought into Dare to Struggle, Dare to Win, kind of, Yusuf always says, to kind of bring like a different perspective, because I know, even on EYL, the criticism is, you don't have like a voice of like a woman, on the show. So it was just Yusuf and Geechee at first. And I was always involved because I would make their what do you call it? The wallpaper. But yeah, then I was brought in to like add in that different perspective. And yeah, we've definitely been getting into, I guess, my different perspectives these past few months, with just a lot of conversations around femicide. And yeah, I guess I'm here because there was a conversation that got started, I guess, about 2 months ago now, with me talking about femicide on the show. And then that came into like some interaction with me and Dr. Dennis, who has also been on this platform.
Yeah, because and so just clearly, like, one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation with you was, one, because of what you've already said, that our interests and work has overlapped, but we haven't really built directly. And I have been meaning to do that. And I did and do want to see the one woman show and all of these other things. And at some point we can talk more about that. And I don't know to what extent it could be performed virtually even, but maybe even talk about, I don't know if you've even considered that, but I think that'd be kind of dope.
We could talk about it. I'm really strict about like,
I know, I got you. So
I do, yeah. But the thing about it, because I do mention you and your book at the show, I do have a video that I don't share with people, and I'm like, maybe I could send you a link. There's some way of the show that because there is a video recording. But
if I'm allowed to watch it privately, I would be willing. I'd be honored to do that, and then whatever we could talk about publicly, we could work that out later. But it was just an idea that literally just had as I'm talking to you right now.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I mean, yeah, and then definitely maybe down the line we could talk about like, because I'm looking to do it other places. I just haven't had like the opportunity, but like schools and stuff like that. But I don't really know how to like go about things like that.
Well, if they ever let me near a budget again at Morgan State, I'll see if we can do that there. I don't. I'm throwing everybody under the bus with the ads. Is that what that? Listen, you anyway. I don't want to go through that again. I understand. I'm not mad at it, but but in terms of today's conversation, well, funnily enough, because since you mentioned EYL, one of the jokes has been that yes, on the one hand, we don't have any consistent women participating, but the three of us have often been referred to as gynocentric in a disparaging way. So I've happily adopted that you know. But I did want to have this conversation because this is something that just, you know, has admittedly never been in my area of expertise or focus, but is always that is the theoretical, political, practical approaches to relationships, gender, sexuality is just it's always there. It's just never been a focus for me. And then I did see that and Dr. Dennis Winkler is I consider him a friend, a homeboy, you know, we're cool with each other. But when I saw this exchange, I said, you know, I was like, it's on the one hand indicative of a pattern of problem in Black radical spaces. And then and then because I do at least know the both of you somewhat a little bit and like the both of you, I was like, let me so I checked out his video. I checked out the comment section and you know, and watched, of course, the Dare to Struggle episode. So and I have my own thoughts, but let you at least guide us through this. And then, of course, when, you know, at some point, I'm sure, you know, we've already talked a little bit, Dr. Winkler and I will have a conversation or some follow-up at some point in some kind of way, I'm sure. And he and others are, of course, always welcome. But all right, so how would you like us to proceed? I'll let you determine that. And I do have your the Google folder you sent pulled up. So
yeah. I guess for me, like, I think it would be good to just kind of like go through the whole thing and kind of like what happened. No, I think EYL is strong with you, even with you three. And then I guess, you know, the whole thing of like you being gynocentric. And I think even Diallo kind of really leads the way with that, with him calling out the Black male studies, a whole thing. And I think that's honestly how this kind of got started in a sense, as far as me and Dr. Dennis having some additional exchange after I did my presentation, because he was in the comments when you guys were talking about that Squire guy. And that's what, kind of triggered me to be like, the like Black Republican dude. Maybe I'm saying his name wrong.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's right. The Heritage Foundation dude, the Black family. Yeah.
And I felt like it was important for me to kind of circle back to the fact that I think that's what, you know, a lot of this Black male studies kind of talk can kind of lead you back that way. So I was more so trying to like, you know, talk about like how I do think that they connect. And like even Diallo has kind of made these connections a few times on EYL where like, where it just gets kind of like borderline or maybe so much like a radical version of like manosphere-ness. And I don't, like I said, I don't think it's something that Dr. Dennis is necessarily doing intentionally, but I do think it borders that line, especially when, you know, when it comes to his responses to certain conversations that I got started when it comes to femicide. So yeah, so I guess we could kind of circle back to that just to kind of give people like a little a brief of, and then I'll kind of go into like some of my responses to some of the things that I was frustrated about when it came to his response that I feel like he wasn't necessarily seeing. But yeah, I know this first link is basically like the first episode where I talked about femicide. And yeah, I'll admit we didn't have like a working definition on the platform because this was a episode that we kind of put together that day where we just wanted to talk about the recent killings that were happening at that time. But it felt like I guess for me, the experience that I went through when that happened was, you know, oh, well, she didn't know the exact definition. That's why this whole thing just shouldn't even be talked about, which to me, I thought was crazy because so much on this platform, we talk about definitions, further defining things, drawing things out. And I mean, it's just, I don't come from an academic background. So me overall, like, I don't always know the textbook definition of things, but I do talk about it in context. Like, if you ask me, like, how do you define colonialism? I'm not going to have probably the textbook definition, but I'm going to be able to point to Israel. I'm going to be able to point to, like, America. I'm going to be able to talk about it in its context. I may not be able to say, like, so that's kind of what happened, which still, if you look at the episode, we were talking about everything in exact context. But this was the video that I guess set off the conversation, just to give people like an overview.
What has been by femicide? I'm not familiar with it. Please.
Femicide is like murder on women. I don't know. I actually do need to look if it's defined. I think it's just murdering women or murder of women. But yeah, Black femicide would be murder of Black women. And the talk about it is just, the level of Black women that get murdered in like interpersonal relationships, is very high. And there's just been a lot of different responses to it. There's been a lot of, there's a Sabrina Fairfax thing. Before that, there was an influencer, Ashley. I'm blanking out on her last name, but that happened to her. Before that, there was the mayor that got killed by her husband. And then recently there was a Black man this past weekend that murdered 8 of his children and attempted to murder his partner or ex-partner, 2 of his ex-partners, I believe. I think both of the partners survived with injuries, but all of the children are dead. Like, Geechee, you about to say something or?
No, so I think I never really I heard it, and I guess that's a good question by Yusuf, because I wonder if there's like a working definition, because what I even just looked up real quick, it says is the intentional gender-based murder of women or girls, typically defined as the killing of females by males because they are female.
Mm-hmm.
It is distinct from homicide, mm-hmm. as it is driven by misogyny, inequality, and male entitlement, often involving domestic violence.
So it's like we got basically to the definition, and we did a whole, hour and a half long episode talking about and in a way that I don't think, I do know that there is a very liberal approach to how people talk about femicide. Like, that doesn't, that's nothing new to me. I mean, that's a liberal approach to the way people talk about capitalism, the way people talk about all these things. So my intention with that episode was because I saw a lot of like, Black men just have to do better. Black men just get it together. Like, Black men are just not, making us feel safe, and y'all need to be accountable. And my intention with even bringing it to the platform was to have a wider discussion that wasn't so much on like, oh, well, Black men this and Black men that, and y'all need to hold each other accountable, which is how the conversation tends to get reduced. But just a wider conversation of how does this system impact Black people overall? How does femicide in particular overall affect Black women? And that is what the actual episode got into. But then, like I said, from that clip, just a lot of the comments were just kind of like, oh, that's, kind of like throwing away the whole conversation in a sense. And I get it was a clip, but I just felt like, there was so much focus on why didn't she have the perfect definition? And that's why. And it just felt like very much like, I don't know, like a nitpicky thing where it's just kind of like, is it that you really just, are so stuck on me, not having the proper definition? Or do you just not like the subject overall because it makes you uncomfortable because you feel like it's a personal attack on Black men? And that's what it kind of gets into. And that's what Dr. Dennis showed with like a lot of his response to me overall. We can pull up the comment section a little bit and then show, his video where he said a few things that, pointed out like, wow, we really need to further define this because, yeah, there is kind of a glazing over. And yeah, I'll admit, when I said that quick definition, because like I said, I didn't have anything in front of me, sometimes I over define things, where, like, you know, I'll include things in a definition that aren't necessarily in a definition, but tend to be in a conversation around the definition. So I did minimize it, and that was a very, you know, small definition. But the fact that it got further defined by Geechee and more, you know, drawn out, I just didn't see why it was so stuck on, like, oh, you know, this is, you know, wrong and da 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 da. But yeah, so Dr. Dennis goes, absolutely. How does one prove how much that is as it's being used? That's my question. But also, we're using words without truly knowing the definition, triggered by gender wars, supported by our miseducation and experiences under colonization. You know, yeah. And I think at that time when he responded, I already got several comments under this that were so, like, you know, like, yeah, like just pointing at, like, the whole thing of the definition and not the actual subject, which is, we're talking about these Black women have been being murdered. And so to me, that's what triggered me, is that, you know, your first response is, oh, how is she defining these things? That, okay, yeah, I'd like to, you know, talk more about these actual women getting killed, and, like, the focus being on that. So yeah, so I went off, you know, and to me, I felt like a lot of the comments were, you know, trying to disregard the overall point by, like, pointing to the fact that, like, I didn't know, like, the definition, and I didn't like the fact that he was like, oh, we're triggered by gender wars, because I felt like to me, that's the wrong way to talk about it. Like, you can say people pull these things and end up talking about it in a gender war way, but the whole intention of that episode was to get off the gender war thing and talk about how both men and women still contribute to patriarchal norms and misogyny, that it's not even a gender thing, and that both of these attitudes, you know, do contribute to a lot of the work on the ground that we do, and grassroots movements, and, you know, and so much more. So that's what, I guess, frustrated me. And so, yeah, and so we had a back and forth, because he was like, oh, I wasn't coming for you. And then once again, I felt it became all about how I responded to him, and, oh, I, you know, said this and da 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 da, and I had an attitude, as opposed to the overall issue itself. And so that's what, you know, made me mad. But we can take a pause here on that.
No, so on the one hand, I appreciate how these conversations can emerge on a show like that, and without maybe all the preparation in advance that everyone might want at a given moment. I admit, what bothered me the most initially when I was looking through that was that I caught it as I was reading it, that his use of the phrase gender wars and triggered was going to elicit or could elicit a certain response. I also do admit, I thought it was a little quick to call him a reactionary idiot, which I think is part of. Now, look, please don't misunderstand me. I don't know if you know me, but I've made not that I'm even categorizing what you said there as an error. Let me not even say that. But what I will say is I've made many errors in public or even private discussion of certain topics that don't lead to generative, you know. So that was really but that's where and just as I was reading it, that's what I felt in the moment. Honestly, I was like, when I read his phrase, I was like, then I read yours, and I was like, and then and then you're right, it just descends into and I think while I have agreements and disagreements, I watched his video last night, and in response, and we talked a little bit, and I have some disagreements, but I'm mostly concerned with the community's ability to have these conversations.
Yeah.
I admit, sensitive and probably caught up in my own biases for sure. I have been sensitive over the feeling that Black men get targeted as this or that, and then not even saying it's always wrong. I'm just saying it's a defensiveness I felt. And then the response that I or others have it just takes on some unhelpful. But there is also something I also want to just be clear on. There is something that is just that I've been struggling with for years. That there is this, I think, real problem between materialists and the African-centered cultural nationalist community.
Mm-hmm.
And I've tried to intervene here and there over the years, and I've not seen much success in my own personal intervention. Mm-hmm. But I think so what ends up happening, and I feel like I saw that in this exchange, is that there are things that are not being addressed from each side that are either assumed or just going unsaid. And so that said, and I'll stop here, one thing, and I think I saw Dr. Winkler in the chat, one thing that I would say is that I thought that he could have done better in his video response to this was define African-centered approaches to feminism and womanhood and gender that would specifically address his concerns with what he felt you were doing. Mm-hmm. He also does. Yeah, I'll just stop there. So that was that. But okay, so my other question, though, specific to you, and I don't know if where you've gone over the last few months or weeks with this. What I felt confused over, because this is not my area of expertise, and I did try to read one or two things and listen to the definition. How do we distinguish between femicide and what I would have just understood to be male violence against women in the context of patriarchy within colonialism, or something like that? Why, and then when I looked into it a little bit and saw the Europeanization of the term femicide and it being this broadly applied around the world, I did admit that I fell into some of my own biases around concerns around, so is this going to be a liberal white European approach that is not going to take proper account for the colonial realities that African people suffer, et cetera, and so forth. But I don't know enough. So that's
and I think this forced me to do deeper, like I said, to look deeper into everything, because like I said, I was kind of more focused on the women and just the events that occurred, and I wasn't even thinking so much about the word femicide in general. It's just like, okay, well, this is the word, and like I know that this is how we tend to talk about these cases, so let me just focus on these women and these incidents and like these conversations that I'm hearing around it. But then when I did my actual like, I guess, what do you call it, like lecture and whatnot, when I put together the slides and really went deeper into the definition, and I don't know if I can pull up, or maybe if I give you
you may be able to share from where you are, but if you want, you can send me something and I'll pull it up.
Oh yeah, I think I actually can do a share screen. Let's see, how can I? Sorry, give me 1 second.
No, it's all good, and I'll stop sharing that.
I don't know if y'all is it showing, or I don't know.
Oh yeah, here we go. There it is. Yep, it's on the screen now.
So this was like, the thing that I presented on the show, and let me, I guess, put this one percent mode so it's bigger.
And I do need to add some of these links. So I add the link to all of these shows, including Dr. Dawes' shows and to the show, the full show where this is presented as well.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay, and so that was the whole thing of like, for me, is there's a specific definition, and I think even like I said, my mistake was just being like, oh well, this is a similar thing, but for Black women. But the more I looked into it, there is a distinct definition that is kind of more different when it comes to Black women versus white women, because if you have femicide overall, is a gender-based murder of women and girls, typically defined as the intentional killing of females by males because they are female. Black femicide is not simply femicide that happens to involve Black victims, but is a distinct phenomenon shaped by the compounding effects of race and gender oppression simultaneously. And so, And so that was my thing too, is that I even limited myself because I wasn't so confident necessarily in my, definition off the top of my head. Although I knew I always would incorporate these things into the conversation, that is the framework in general, or the push is to talk about all of these things under this distinct issue of the killing of Black women. So like I said, when we talk about gender-based killing of Black women, it talks about how their racial, our racial identity shapes our vulnerability to violence, the invisibility to data, stuff in the media, institutional failure. So it is talking about all these different things under actual colonialism. It isn't just a thing of like, oh, these Black men just have to get it together. The conversation in which, even in the first episode, was that there's so many elements that apply to this, whether we talk about intimate partner violence, state violence, the issue of Black women being missing and murdered, and how, every now and then there'll be like a media spark of like, hey, did you realize there's all these Black women missing and nobody's, looking for them? Like, all of those things tie under the issue of Black femicide. So it is not like the way it was defined even in Dr. Dennis's response to me going off or whatever. Like, the way it was often defined is like, how do you prove it's because that, or how do you or that I'm making some gloss statement about Black men, when no, this is a framework that specifically talks about Black women and the things that lead to our murders, and our murders not taken seriously on this land. And then when you get wider internationally, how it affects Black women. So that was the biggest thing that, I dropped the ball on, but I made sure, like I said in the second episode, to really kind of get deeper into that. But the way I had been talking about it was always these things. So that
and then this does clearly clearly decenter Black men as quote unquote the problem. So you've already right here, as far as I'm concerned and aware, addressed this issue that I have seen and have had a problem with, where there does seem to be, even by at times Black women, this emphasis on Black men as the problem, or as a chief among problem, and seemingly, from again my limited vantage point, not putting it in the context that you have here and are describing here. And I feel like that's important just to emphasize. And if I've gotten any of that wrong, please.
So that's the biggest thing. And I feel like, people, like I said, because a lot of us, and, a lot of the mainstream voices are still liberal. So it is going to take that. But I think it is the job of especially somebody that identifies as like a radical Black feminist to kind of like decenter on like, hey, I don't want to be about Black men anymore. And that was even my intent from the beginning of like, because it was just leading to the fact, because even Geechee kind of brought up when I was talking about, people will say, like, just talking about like, hey, the stats are, because Black women are usually killed in this intimate partner violence, the idea is you're somewhat safer in a house without a Black man in the house, as opposed to like, the situation with. Like, that is what the liberals will see automatically. It's like, oh, it's just a thing. But like, what I'm trying to get to is like, no, it's so much wider than just, oh, like, do I need to be around Black men or not? Like, it's a whole wider, conversation. But it's easy to jump to that conclusion but like I said, most people that jump to this aren't, it's the same people that look at things as far as like capitalism, and Black people just need to, do better with their money, and like all these other things where they see a certain result of like Black people are poor. So that means, i.e., I just need to do better with my money, as opposed to actually breaking down, the things that lead to, the fact that like capitalism was built on our exploitation. So it's not a matter of, oh, you just need to like do better with your money and financial literacy. But that's the, liberal conclusion one can come to when they look at, well, Black people make this much, white people make this much, and so that's what I'm saying, a similar thing, where if you just look at the numbers, the liberal conclusion will be, oh my God, I just need to stay the heck away from Black men. But like I said, as far as our job is to push these conversations further and not look like, oh, well, just because there's a certain conclusion, this doesn't mean like, oh, I can't, that it's a thing that solely is an attack on a specific group or something like that. If I'm making sense. you know.
Yeah, I think so. So, but when you say the phrase radical Black feminism, do you have a particular working definition for that phrase, or a way you conceive of that? Because I am sensitive, admittedly, to the argument that Dr. Winkler and others have made around, you know, when we hear the word feminism, even when we hear the word intersectionality.
Yeah, I'm not one that's
just. So I'm happy to hear when you and others use the phrase, in particular, radical Black feminism or some variation of that. And I just was, you know, yeah. But go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, that I do have a definition, and I went through it. To me, yeah, it's a political theoretical framework holding that race, gender, class, and sexuality are I messed up my word, consecutive, inseparable systems that must be fought simultaneously, rooted in the Combahee River Collective and the broader Black feminist tradition. It argues that Black women's liberation is not a subset liberation, but it's a prerequisite. It critiques white feminism and the centering of whiteness and Black nationalism as a subordinating for subordinating gender. So the whole thing about it is the work of Black radical feminism has always critiqued mainstream liberal feminism. And I feel like people will point to these other quote unquote African-centered frameworks and say that as if Black radical feminists have not already been doing that work. And I think, to me, that's the frustrating part about it, is because I think, that's literally been the work of Black radical feminists. Like, I go back to the Combahee River Collective, there was already an understanding of like how white feminism is used to kind of separate you from, men, or having these conversations with men. And I guess the whole work of Black radical feminists is we can have these discussions together. We can have these discussions together, and it doesn't have to be like this man versus women thing, like, because that us having a conversation or a context or a framework for gender is, important for our liberation as Black people as a whole. It's not like something separate. So that, to me, has always been the framing. But I think, like I said, what tends to happen is they talk about, the limitations. And like, there's been so many people, from June Jordan, people even talk about Claudia Jones, but they'll say Claudia Jones never necessarily referred to herself specifically as that. But to me, and that's what I talk about, like these actual labels. Like, I don't have to call myself this. I do call myself this because that's how most people would define it, or would define that frame. But you can have these ideas and you still be categorized as that thing. And so that's the thing where it's like, is it really Black radical feminism or feminism you have an issue with? Or is it women attempting to talk about race, class, and gender simultaneously? Like, is that the hang up,
Well,
so that's the frustration.
One of the hangups that I know has occurred and occurs is around the other part of that definition that targets not just white feminism, but Black nationalism. And then what ends up, and again, I've not read any of the Combahee River Collective authors and their associated works well enough at all, so to claim any type of expertise. So I don't, off the top of my head, know to what extent in their work they've addressed this. And even my recent revisit of June Jordan was not in this context. So, but what ends up happening is that, at least in the mind's eye of Black nationalists and associated, political variants, is that the feeling becomes that the concept of Black family, Black community becomes subservient or submitted beneath the concern over some broad liberation of, in this case, Black women. That can seem to be connected to a more, again, white international womanhood, as opposed to a concern over the Black community, the Black nation, and so on.
Yeah. And I think, like I said, that's why even when I did my research of like, if the Combahee River Collective, that was one of the statements, is like, we work with Black men. And even though most of them might have identified as lesbian, that it goes deeper than that. But even that is like the idea of like, oh, because I'm not sleeping with Black men and not wanting to procreate with Black men, therefore I have to be your enemy. But it's like, I think it takes a lot of political clarity to say like, hey, even though y'all aren't even like my preference, you know, sexuality wise, like you are still my brothers and we are still working with you. And I think it furthers the idea that is so much pushed upon us in this colonial framework of like, you know, if we're not looking to build, you know, this Black nuclear family, then we're somewhat working against our race, when, you know, the whole nuclear family was pushed on us to hurt us more because it stopped us from being able to have this broader community and looking out on each other, because it focused so much on, you know, the the woman, father and kids, and not so much having this wide scope of just community and community care. And so it looks to not, you know, attack that setup, you know, of a Black man, a woman, and child, but to broaden, you know, what does community look like? What does it look like for all of us to come together, and it not even so much be about, you know, us procreating or trying to imitate what we think is acceptable because of what whiteness has, you know, pushed upon us as far as what family has to look like. Family can look like, you know, the lesbian neighbors and the nuclear family and the other family of, you know, a bunch of aunts and uncles all living in the same, and we can all still be in unison and have this, and we shouldn't look to white people as like, oh, we're not living up to some expectation. But I feel like sometimes, often with this Black male studies, it kind of goes back to the same thing that I was calling, or that you all were calling, what's his name out of the Squire guy out, because it's like, it's like, oh, fathers in the home, and that's what's wrong with us. And to me, I feel like it ends up marrying that. But I think a wider thing was, with Dr. Dennis's response was like, oh, look into he told me, even not the next response that I'm probably going to show, but the response after that was like, oh, well, look into Africana womanism and look into African womanism with Nadav. And I looked into both of them, but I feel like there's just obvious limitations, and the limitations of both of those frameworks is why it's so hard for us to even have these discussions about something like a femicide. And I think that is my issue, is that it's like, we'll turn to these things, but if you look into these frameworks, it's very obvious why a cis hetero man would say, oh, I'm an Africana womanist. You know, it's very obvious, you know. And so I feel like
so I read Clenora Hudson Weems's work many years ago, admittedly, and I haven't read Nadav's work on Africana womanism.
Mm-hmm.
I do have to say, and as we said with her, that her work critical of Marxism was flawed. It was flawed. And one of the problems that I have with all sides of these quote unquote sides is that there's an insufficient, I think, level of study of the so-called other. So I've always felt like the African-centered community does not read the materialist history work enough, and vice versa. And one of the issues I think that all of us, unquote, all sides would benefit from is more research into pre-colonial African societies, social, gender, familial relationships. Not necessarily that I'm arguing that we should glorify everything pre-colonial and that we should look to return to those, although every form of those forms. Well, what I find fascinating, the more I do look at it, is that looking to apply our contemporary understanding of gender roles, sexuality, familial organization, and trying to apply that to pre-colonial Africa is wildly mistaken. The African continent was doing all kinds of different things with gender roles, sexuality, familial organization, and I would argue 99% of us in today's world would find discomfort or confusion over a lot of it. I just wanted to throw that out there. I don't even know this. Remember where I was going with that, but go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, but look at Dr. He's saying, oh, he wouldn't define himself, but he's saying that only a woman, you know, that it's you know, and I from what I studied, I've heard men say that they're more of an Africana womanist, but he said he isn't, but he's saying that you would have to be a woman for that. But even that is problematic, because I feel like if the whole thing that she laid out, and I don't know if you want to pull this up.
Yeah, whenever you're ready, I'll put, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
And just so you know, and just so everybody knows, I see the numbers who are here, but in passing, I've seen a couple names, but I'm for the most part not following the chat. I don't want to. So salute to everybody. Yeah, you do have, if you want to engage is fine, but I find like sometimes when I need to focus, I'm trying to. So if folks don't, I'm not intentionally ignoring anyone. Peace, welcome everybody, and you know, but I'm not following it too closely. But anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so like I said, so similar to the, I guess, the heart of Black radical feminists is this Black radical feminism is it she does look to critique feminism, but like I said, I feel like it just goes back to me. If I had to put words on it, it really goes back to like African-centered type of patriarchy, but it won't say itself that. But if you look at the 18 characteristics and stuff, like some of these are problematic. It's like, you know, like it's not necessarily bad, but I'll list some of them. But yeah, self-namer, family-centered, strong, in concert with male counterpart, mothering, nurturing, spiritually grounded, loves music, dance, food, loves cooking. So it goes back to kind of like this, you know, like the stereotypical gender roles of like mothering, nurturing, cooking. And yeah, I just think because even the African continent was so diverse with those things, is to only focus on, once again, the mothering, the nurturing, the cooking, again, I just feel like takes us backwards. And then the whole idea of in concert with male counterpart is interesting to me because, like I said, I think the biggest betrayal of this framework is it doesn't take into context the fact that, you know, we have been in this country for 500 years and we still have over 500 years of this colonialist, white hegemonic, imperialist framing and how we look at things. And I understand the idea of wanting to go back to African customs, but how do you do that without addressing like all the thoughts and having an actual framework to address anything that we've had to experience, or any programming or indoctrination that we've experienced, post us being on this continent? Like, so well, I'm just like,
another thing that and again, I don't want to be at all confused with the Western condemnation of African-centered thought. But I think, again, sort of to my previous point, that I think I would want to encourage more engagement among us all with what pre-colonial Africa looked like. So how are we defining pre-colonial African culture? And then I do know that there is a strand, at least within the African-centered world, that does just take wholehearted for granted that all tendencies in the African world towards same gender loving and any other non so-called Western traditional form of familial organization is itself Western and imposed. So it's, in other words, that homosexuality and et cetera and so forth is I would argue too often associated with Western imposition and imperialism. And that's why, even as I'm remembered and I'm being reminded of Hubson Weems's argument as I'm rereading your page here, that just even, I would argue, even using Alice Walker as the basis for your critique of Black radical feminism would be flawed. Like, that's why, like, when I'm asking you,
I'm like, who really looks at her as this Black radical feminist?
No Black radical would look to Alice Walker for really anything that I'm aware of. Certainly not for a definition of Black radical feminism. And it's ultimately I believe that it's in part a critique of not just her being too liberal, but also gay. Yeah. And that's, part of the problem, and then lastly, as I've asked some of my African-centered friends, and I'll continue to ask, because I definitely consider myself one who fully appreciates that wing of thought, but I do admit I am not aware of some of the more recent scholarship, and I would be interested to see where this work has gone over the last 30 years since Hudson Weems wrote it. But
yeah.
please go ahead.
And I did, like I said, because I like Dr. Dennis did challenge me to come up with my own framework, and I did in this. I'm jumping around because I did the whole thing already on Dare to Struggle, so I am jumping around. Sure. But I did come to but I'm saying I came to my own framework by obviously like looking at these other frameworks and what I thought were missing, and that what I think we all should be doing, and I think that's the whole aspect. Like even a radical Black feminist is gonna maybe look into Walker's work and be like, this is where she falls short, and this is why I wouldn't identify her as necessarily a radical Black feminist. But there still is gonna be like some overlaps, I mean, it's the same way. Like, there may be a liberal that says they're anti-capitalist, and every now and then, there may be something, okay, yeah, that they are right on that, but then they still go back to this, and that's why I would differentiate myself. So it's like one of those things. But I think what tends to happen is you see a liberal Black woman may say, something like toxic masculinity, then they may hear me say the same word, and it's like, oh, well, she's saying the liberal word, and so now throw her away because and I don't know. I think sometimes, to me, and I think that's one of my bigger frustrations with, I guess putting all feminists, especially radical Black feminists, into the same category in a sense, because it kind of like puts this lie as if like Black women aren't smart enough to be like, hey, I can take this and pull this and align with that, but I don't rock with it. It's like as if we don't have the agency or discernment to be like, okay, this is what they got right, but this is where they're like very wrong. And I feel like we do this with everything. You were just talking about, how you look at a lot of African-centered study where there is a lot that's like, okay, this is dope, I can rock with it. There's some things like, okay, the way you're talking about materialism is a little off, but we both can agree on this. But I just feel like you're snatching Black women's, mental capacity to do the same thing, where it's like, okay, yeah, this right here, yeah, I think that men can be, or that there can be a toxic masculinity that both men and women can attribute to, but oh, if I say this word, I'm automatically, oh, she's liberal, she's stuck right there, and it's not looked at like how I'm applying it or even how I'm discussing it. Like even with femicide, it's more looked at as like I say the word and it's like, okay, you're just the same as every other, I guess whiny liberal talking about this, as opposed to how does she actually talk about the conversation? Did she bring up imperialism? Did she bring up colonialism? Did she talk about class in the aspects? Like, I just feel like when you're not able to do those things and you automatically hear certain words, like, that you feel attack you as a Black man, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to put all that in one basket. I think that's where the problem goes, because it's just like I said, it's just like a erasure of the Black women and the Black scholarship that radical Black women have done to really talk about some of these differences and the limitations of certain framework. But yeah, so that's what I think. I don't think Africana womanism centers Black women. I just don't, based on what I've seen. Obviously, I haven't read every element of it, but when I did, look into like some of the things I did, this is just, like I said, I felt like there's an erasure of Black queer women and how Black queer women would operate in this framework. And I feel like I said, it makes I feel like it makes race it kind of becomes this race first thing, where we've already pointed out the problems of that when it comes to class elements. We're like, I just think you're strongest when you're able to look at race, class, and gender in tandem. And I understand like having different, focuses, but I feel like when, I guess the arching thing of this is, race is the priority, and like kind of just fall in line, be in concert with your man, and it kind of frames any discussion, and it sets Black radical feminists up for failure. Anybody who dares to talk about specific things that impact Black women as somebody that's dividing up the race. And I just think I don't see how, me as somebody that's an organizer that's on the ground, like I was literally in a meeting a week ago, that had an elder, former Black Panther, former person of the Black Liberation Army, and there was a sister, 23 years old, that organized the entire weekend. And I literally saw how that plays out overall, like in even in our organizing spaces, because we were together in a room talking about, you know, different issues, and she was the one to bring up like, okay, there what about these issues of, you know, of patriarchy and the issues of gender and sexuality. And she was pushed back in the sense, like it was kind of shot down. I don't know if it was intentional, but it was shot down in a sense by that elder of like, you know, like what she was her bringing it up was a distraction, you know. And you saw that play out where she had to end up exiting the room. And so once again, you see somebody who has put in the work, who is on the ground, who spent weeks putting in work, time, energy, and efforts to organize this big Black event in Atlanta for organizers on the ground, for people that want liberation. But once again, the pushback, even if not directly, because if you ask him, he was talking about the we, the same way Dr. Dennis was talking about the we. It wasn't supposed to be at her particularly, but the second she says something about it, it's, you know, oh, we don't, you know, we don't have time to get sides. We got to do this, and we need to focus on us all together first. And that same sort of rhetoric, and like, you know, there's just no. Yeah, I just saw how, like, I guess invisible that young sister felt in that moment of like, I've given my time, my energy. Clearly, I do put my race as a priority, but even me bringing up this side thing, it's like it's automatically shut down as like I'm somewhat trying to distract from the very thing that I put the most effort into, which is this weekend. But even me as a lead organizer, like my voice is silenced in a sense when I start to be like, well, what about some gender? What about some sexuality stuff? Like, we're saying we're anti-patriarchy, but what do we really mean by that? You know? So you know, I'm not, and I think that's the biggest thing is I'm not, with me having these conversations, I know there are broader things. There's broader, you know, massive, you know, the highest forms of patriarchy is the white man, is, you know, these imperial leaders, is, you know, all of these things. And I'm not saying, oh, us poor Black people, we have to, you know, be the ones to, you know, I'm not, but I'm saying as far as a culture, as far as how we even operate in our own grassroots circles, we have to have a way to discuss these things where it doesn't always feel like me bringing it up, I'm taking away from the intention or taking away from the overall liberation of us collectively, you know.
No, I appreciate that. And as much as I criticize anecdotes, I'm going to share one that I've been struggling with and see what you think, and then we can quickly move on to whatever you want to get to next. Just to create a composite summary version of this broader story. For years, a buddy of mine has been quietly raising the issue of character in our struggles. And when he initially brought it up to me years and decades ago at this point, I was like, I don't care. Like, that's not we need to free ourselves. We need to go to war first, and then we can talk about character and principle and all this other bullshit. I was completely unmoved. I don't know if this is age, me just becoming weaker and the cliche of an older man, but and having gone through some personal experiences in these so-called movement spaces, I've pretty much done a 180. And I was telling him somewhat recently, I think you were right. And I think the absence of a focus on character and principle and behavior in these spaces is more of a problem even than ideology. That was at least how I felt in that conversation. Like, I was furious at what happened to me personally. And again, longer story short, I've been encouraged by others to use this to help me see some of my own shortcomings in my myopia around gender and sexuality. In other words, sort of what you're saying. And I've been guilty of this inversions over the years where someone will bring the issue of gender or sexuality into the space. And I'm like, what that got to do with us swinging on somebody? And that's all I'm interested in. Are you going to swing on somebody or not? I don't care who you sleeping with, but are you going to swing? And I don't want to say that that's entirely wrong, but I think that and I do have a version of my approach to identity that incorporates that. But my point is ultimately that hear differently now what you're saying, that about the erasure of topics around gender and sexuality in as we prefer, and it has taken me this issue of character as opposed to nationalism to reach this different space that I'm in now. But my point being that I do think that as we build towards what is in my mind a sovereign African diaspora, that these issues have to be brought up. Like I'm not, in my concept of this sovereign African diaspora, everybody's there. That is women, variously defining folks on the spectrum of gender and sexuality, however, whatever. I'm like, if you're an African, you're in. That's like my, whatever. But I think that these issues do need to be, we need to look at a little more closely how we're engaging them and be a little more honest with each other and ourselves. And yeah, even as I'm saying, I also admit this last point here, that I have seen and would want to put up some guardrails around folks who do take these issues as their primary focus and concern, to the extent it does become liberal or anti-nationhood. Like, I don't want to abandon the concept of Black nationalism as much as I would rather it be amended to a revolutionary form, as I understand these terms. So, yeah. All right, all that to say, please, I just wanted to really just give you a chance to catch your breath and have a sip of water. Now you can continue.
Makes a lot of sense. I think I think, to me, like I said, this is an important part of Black nationalism, an important part of pan-Africanism. Like, I don't look at it as like, oh, it's this thing. But what I am seeing is that, especially with these younger groups, like, and I think maybe this may be a bit of my fear that I don't know may eventually change in some time, because maybe I can't control how people respond to certain things. But what I am seeing and what concerns me, which is why I'm so big on having these conversations, is the increasing idea or feeling that, I see with even, I guess, women that just Black women every day, of just like feeling like their needs, their livelihood does not matter. And I see this with Black women, queer people, and even people in the movement space. And I just wondered, like, and I think my concern is if it becomes this thing of like, oh, every time I bring up this is it's sidetracked or it's looked at as a distraction, then I feel like, for lack of better verbiage for this, like, to me, it just seems like it's almost pushing, people. And I'm not saying I can control this, but it just feels like it's almost a push for these women to then end up, that may have been leaning more towards radical, but being like, I'm just gonna, follow the liberalism and F it, I'm gonna focus on me and do me, because I keep bringing up these things in this spaces. So I'm gonna just go be with the people that look like me, even if they politic is a little liberal. Like, at least I feel seen and heard there. And so that is my I think that, to me, the whole idea that you're just talking about like people having these hyper focuses on identities, I think it's a reactionary thing that is happening because they feel like they're not seen in these spaces that they originally go to. And when I talk to women that I feel like have left an organization, or even when I'm in these kind of like solely Black feminist, more identity driven spaces, like I said, there is a huge thing of like, yeah, whenever we're these other places, we're not seen and heard. And I think, I don't know. Like I said, I can't control people's reaction. I'm not saying there is an individual thing where like, okay, how does these transitions look like in process? Like, you're not going to get, somebody that's been obviously colonized, mentally indoctrinated as well. Like, okay, like in one day, I understand feminism, I understand queer liberation, I understand all these things. So there is a thing, and like kind of a wake-up call that I kind of feel like they need to have, in a sense. But at the same time, I can't ignore the fact that like I'm seeing these things in live time, and like it is making me be like, I see why, even though I'm not looking to do that, but I see why certain people get these feelings in these spaces that end up becoming, kind of de-radicalized in a sense, or moving away from like Black nationalism or pan-africanism overall, and just end up focusing on these identities, you know. And so I feel like that's why I feel like it's important for me to have these conversations, and for me to remind, and even me bringing femicide to the discussion in a place where we can talk about how all of these systems, because it's system driven. That's my biggest thing is that people look at it as like, oh, it's an attack on a specific person, but these are how these systems impact us all. And that's the biggest thing that I think that I try to point out, you know, within this. But it's a similar thing. Even you know, I look at, you know, when you were talking about character, I feel like even, you know, and I won't get too deep into this, but even, you know, what me and Geechee just experienced with leaving the organization we were part of, where it was like you had a person, you know, constantly wanting to bring up structure within our organizations, and it just looked at as like, not right now, we'll get there. And, you know, it comes to the thing where it's like, you see how these movements are falling apart, because it's like all of these hard conversations, you know, end up always becoming like, oh, that's a sidetrack, or we need to keep moving. And I can see the frustration in the elders. I can see like, you were a political prisoner. You were aware, you came back, and you feel like we're light years behind. But then when you went in, and it's like, what is going on? So I understand that frustration. But at the same time, as somebody's on the ground, I just keep seeing, whether it's character, whether it's organizational structure, whether it's, you know, how we treat women, queer people, and talk about identity in these spaces, like all of these things tend to keep us moving, but it's stuck in the same place, you know, where, you know. So
just quickly, I did see, I lost track of it, and I did see, I did catch this from Dr. Winkler, and I do agree that healing is needed on all sides, and that I do think we need to improved approaches to how we all engage one another with these kinds of conversations that are very difficult and can be very difficult and even contentious at times. But I think that I do think they need to happen. Listen, I need to say this, and I don't mean, you brought it up, so I don't mean to impugn you by saying this with you here, but I also, just to be fair to your generation, my own, and everyone else, including previous ones, our beloved political prisoners who have been able to be released over the last few decades and rejoin the community are rejoining a community that is still suffering this internal colonialism as I prefer to describe it, and have themselves been, quote unquote, out and relatively free in some cases for a couple of decades, and themselves unable to have more of an impact on those movements. So I sometimes, you know, I don't mean to give any of us an excuse or to justify our inactivity. But I think we have to be aware that some of that frustration is the result of the destruction of these movements and the continuity, the colonialism, which is also what is creating all of the erasure of African cultures, the erasure and the erasure of materialism, and the encouragement of liberalism, and the encouragement of all kinds of abuse of Black women and others. So yeah. All right. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, my bad. Let me know if I'm too, because I just wanted to address one more thing really quick.
No, please go ahead. I'm done.
Dr. Dennis, like I said in the comments and stuff, and I think, like I said, to me, and we can honestly share this, but I think that's the whole thing. Is I think even in his video, he kept talking about, you know, the victimization, you know, like I said, that I had, or like that these frameworks have, when I was talking about femicide, which is something where Black women are the actual victims, Black femicide, if that's what I'm talking about. But like I said, I think to like the focus to me, because even then it's like I see in the comments, you know, like, oh, well, you said I attacked you and all this other stuff. And I think for me, like, yeah, I just think there's so much of a discussion of like, you know, my response or how, and to me, like I said, I saw things that I feel like, you know, decreased my humanity as a Black woman. So I had a certain reaction, and I'm not saying that it's the right reaction to have, but I just feel like, you know, yeah, at this very moment, I'm not, you know, doing that, and I'm having a wider conversation, but there still seems to be a focus on, you know, my emotional response to feeling like I was dehumanized as a Black woman, and whether I said, oh, attacked, or you, like, okay, you counteract, and you, whatever you want to say, like, we don't have to use attack, but like I said, this is the thing that I talk about, where it's like, you know, it's like anytime you have these conversations, there can't even just be like, oh, okay, I see where you're coming from. Like, let's talk about the conversation that needs to be had, but like still an emphasis on, oh, you know, but you attacked, and we talk about victimhood. And that's my whole issue too. It's like, I'm the one that's looked at as like making myself a victim because I'm talking about an actual subject of Black femicide. But so much as me saying like, boy, shut up, or like, you know, you attacked me or whatever is being kind of like the grander thing here, you know, as opposed to me talking about the actual issue that I'm talking about. And I think that's like, you know, some of my frustration as well too. You know, it's like, yeah, I think for me, it's just the fact that there's like at least like no accountability of like, you know, perhaps there's something here to what I said, or perhaps like I can see even that, you know, how my words could have been taken as a decrease of her experience as a Black woman. Like there's no talk of that, but like, oh my gosh, you used this word attack, and you said this, and you called me, you said boy bye or whatever, and that made me feel away. And we talk about victimization. That's interesting to me. But yeah.
So I'm sorry, that phrase makes me laugh. And even when I read it in the heated exchange in your back and forth with him, I laugh. And I don't mean to disrespect either one of you with that. I just thought it was funny. And I often, because I hear my daughters saying it, so it's that the phrase makes me laugh. But the whole boy bye thing, it just makes me laugh. But look, so for years, even back when I was doing radio, we were trying to host, you know, loving debates between like recreating the classic Kwame Ture Molefi Asante debate between African-centered or Afrocentricity and scientific socialism, and trying to bridge some of these gaps that I see as unfortunate and unnecessary. So I do agree that ideally, I would like us to have a better way of engaging in disagreements with one another. I understand. I think I understand your point that the response is often not the point. The goal should be to return to the focus on the ideas themselves, and the arguments themselves.
And I think because even, and I like I said, I'll play this in a second, but I think even, you know, like with his response, there was so much, see, this is what we have to deal with, and this is what we have to go through. And like, and then you're talking about bi-directional violence when I'm talking about Black femicide. And like, I even have a slide about that is like, you know, the fact that, you know, it's like, oh, we have to be aware of how we talk to each other, but there's no account for you bringing up bi-directional violence when I'm talking about Black femicide, and there's no awareness of like the harm in that. But I'm supposed to be seen as harmful because I said you attacked me, or boy bye, or you're a reactionary idiot or whatever. But there's no account for like, you know, how bringing up bi-directional violence when talking about Black femicide is extremely harmful, you know?
Gotcha.
So like I said, it's like there's no, oh, be aware of how we talk to each other. But like I said, I'm not saying I did it perfectly, but I just feel like there's no account of like even that, or even like, you know, but yeah, I just wanted to bring this up really quick before we play this part. But I did want to talk about yeah, the bi-directional breakdown, because this tends to be something that's always brought up. And once again, it really dehumanizes Black women overall. Sorry, maybe I did the wrong page. Sorry, I think I actually need to go back. It might be this one is more so what I wanted to talk about. But yeah, because bi-directional violence describes a pattern of mutual conflict within a relationship. Femicide describes an outcome, a killing, whose predictors are overwhelmingly one-directional. And even I know he says he deals with, you know, talking to like people that are having a thing of bidirectional violence or whatever. But that's the thing about it. Most people that are in bidirectional violent relationships, they're gonna go get help. Like, you know, and it isn't gonna lead to, or they'll just eventually separate. Like, that's the common thing. It isn't gonna lead to femicide. Femicide, like I said, when I go back and even in this, I talk about the things that are indicators of femicide, where you're seeing a pattern of cohesive control, estrangement, prior strangulation, firearm access. There's like so many other things that point to the fact that there's a leading person, a leading person when it comes to these cases of femicide. Because most people that are victims of femicide, most people that are victims of femicide, this comes from gun violence. So like I said, you know, that's often brought up, like I said, to dehumanize Black women. Like, and this happens, you know, like I said, isn't just a thing where I'm saying of Black men, like even Black women, when we defend ourselves against our abuser, we're often seen, it often then becomes bidirectional violence. All it takes is, you could be in an abusive relationship for years. All it takes is for you to have one day where you decide to hit back, and automatically it's deemed, oh, that's what they just do. They just fight. You know, there's no framework, or there's no, people don't even leave a space open of like reactionary abuse. Like, we're seen as like, we're automatically seen as the equal for defending ourselves against actual abuse. So yeah, like, and it happens even in law. Like, most of the time, like if it's a white woman and she's in an abusive relationship, more than likely that it'll be a case where that white man will be arrested in a case, and not the white woman. But anytime, like, there's more cases statistically where Black women are arrested along with the Black men. No, and like I said, he keeps saying this, and like I said, you keep saying the bidirectional. No, it doesn't lead. So what you're saying is, when you make statements like that, that's the issue. When you make statements like that, like most people that are victims of femicide were attacked when they left the home. So you're telling me then that that's a logical conclusion for femicide, because if a Black woman is fed up and actually leaves the home, somehow it's still interrogating a conclusion for somebody to then bring out a firearm and shoot her. Like, so it's like when we talk about, you know, yeah, sorry. It's just like, that's just so frustrating to see, you know, sorry. But, you know, like, yeah. So when we talk about these things, it's like it just doesn't make sense. Like, I don't understand, like, why the focus but like I said, it becomes a dehumanization of us. We're not even able to stand up to our abuse. We're not even, where there's a lack of nuance to anything. It's automatically, you know, oh, there must be some bidirectional violence happening, when it's already been said, even with the numbers, but like I said, you can say it can lead to it, but like I said, that shouldn't be a factor. That still is the element of patriarchal violence. The fact that, like, even if somebody you're saying, because even when men describe, like, oh, they've been hit by women, we're talking about slaps, pushes, all of these other things. For you to say that, like, oh, it's leading to that, it's almost like you're saying that that's somewhat like a self-defense. Like that, okay, like, I got smacked by my wife, I got pushed by my wife, therefore me eventually getting to this point where I have to bring out a firearm and my wife is leaving the home. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, I just feel like when people make this argument of bidirectional violence, like, it takes away from the actual system. Because even that itself, like, the fact that your manhood feels so attacked that you have to now kill a person because somebody has pushed you, slapped you, whatever, all the typical things. Like, there's a lethality thing that, like I said, makes this, or is what makes this, you know, that, like, this is like, it's one of those same things where we talk about even hurting within ourselves. Like, you know, when we talk about a guy killing another man, a man killing another man because, like, oh, somebody stepped on your shoe or whatever, there still is a patriarchal element here. That person might have stepped on your shoe or done this, but like I said, if the reaction becomes, now I gotta go and pop him back, Like that's a patriarchal element that you can't like not tie to that. Like even if you feel like somebody has done a certain thing to that. So I just feel like, to me, that's the frustration. But like I said, the majority of these cases, when people open these cases, because a lot of times people aren't, because Black women are so disregarded, you know, in the society, like these cases are closed shut. It's hard to get them reopened to look at the stuff, but like the way it's researched, like I said, people are either seeing stuff through text, people are seeing stuff through, you know, the person leaving the home or moving out. Like and then even people around saying that person, there was a controlling aspect that person had within that relationship. You know, it's a control dynamic. All these things are traced. And so bringing up bidirectional violence, like I said, it's dehumanizing. And I just think it's it puts us in a place where.
So can I ask this? So again, and so on the one hand, I admit I'm not entirely sure what's the best way to have done this. I had thought about inviting the three of us to have a discussion. I thought it would be better initially to have you just be able to lay out your case and have a discussion that way. So, and that's why I was also intentionally wanted to stay out of the chat so that the back and forth, if there is to be one, could happen more directly as opposed to in a chat. But so if you and he want to do that at some point, I'm happy to be involved or not. But I do want to just quickly raise this. So how do you, what do you think is an appropriate response to cisgendered men whose initial reaction to a presentation like this is to feel particularly targeted or to feel some sort of defensiveness, or to even want to raise, as has been raised a couple times I've seen in the chat, the concern specifically for Black men? Let me just invite you to answer that. Like, what do you think should be if someone says, but what about Black men?
I think, like I said, I think it's a matter of decentering yourself, and you have to have that humility. Like, I'm a Black woman and I know I'm oppressed, but if a darker skinned woman is talking about her experience for being dark skinned, I don't automatically, you know, talk about, oh, well, they used to put dirt in my hair and call me light bright and call me white. Like, what does that do? Like, what do you think you're doing when you do that? Like, and I get, like, everybody has their own experiences or whatever across the diaspora, but it's like, I just don't, you know, like, I don't, even if I feel like a Black woman may be more on the liberal leaning part, one thing I never do is recenter myself as a light-skinned Black woman in my experience. And I know that there's some people that do, and I feel like their approach is off. And I think maybe when I was younger, I used to get caught up in I didn't feel accepted, but that's not the same thing as, like, structurally, institutionally, you know, being harmed for having a darker complexion. So, like, how do you, like, I just don't understand, like, the nerve, really, of, like, hearing somebody talk about this and then, like, you know, there's just no world where that's okay, where, like, a darker skinned Black woman talks about, oh, I was automatically seen this way and automatically seen that way for having darker skin, and this is how it's impacted my life, and this is how I'm treated, and this is how I may be masculinized, and all these other things, and I immediately, instead of being like, oh, wow, colorism is real, that's valid, yeah, us as a whole, we have to work, you know, I automatically go into, well, I was inched out as a lighter skinned Black woman. They were all really mean to me and said really mean things. And I got pushed one time on the playground because this girl thought I was white. And, you know, like, what the hell? You know, it's kind of like, I think there's just, you know, and I think that's what makes it very hard for me to understand, I guess, some Black men's approach, because, like I said, you can be an oppressed group and still have certain benefits within that. And, like, I don't know why that's so hard, like, to, like, accept and to, like, know your time and your place in these things. Like, there is elements of these conversations that can lead to liberalism, but how do, like, if I start with those things, Like, I don't understand. Like, you're just not gonna get the best, and sometimes it isn't the place. Like, sometimes you just have to listen. Yeah. Sometimes you just have to listen. Like,
I just want to play this for the chat real quick, and then we'll be right back.
Time out. Y'all take a chill. You need to cool that shit out, and that's the double truth.
The last time I liked the Sam Jackson role, to be honest, but but
who cares? Who cares about light-skinned feelings? Like, that's the whole thing. Is like
I do. I'm out here suffering. I don't know what you over here talking about. All this complaints about the dark-skinned community struggling. I'm out here suffering. No, but I hear you. I hear you.
The whole thing is when you
I do. Yeah. Okay, sorry. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm just saying, even when you talk about your experience, you know, being biracial or whatever, like, that's the thing.
No one suffers like me. None of y'all.
You made it your own thing. It's not like I saw this conversation that darker people were having, and I just was like, oh, but what about, like, and I think sometimes, I don't know. I just think
my cousin's in the chat.
Yeah, but yes, we all suffered. I'm not saying that, but I just feel like when we talk about these institutions of harm and their impact, like, there has to be some sort of wake-up call, like, you know, of just your place in the world. And I just feel like I don't ever, like I said, even if I'm gonna talk about, like, because there's stuff that I see where, like, okay, somebody's really talking about a class thing or a class dynamic, and, you know, there's an over focus on, you know, if they're mixed or their complexion. Like, I see all these things that happen with you where, like, you know, people don't like that you're actually talking about class stuff, so they'll go and they'll talk about, oh, but he's a biracial, or what about, you know. And so, but I'm never going to lead with that, because at the same time, I'm in the world and I know how a lot of people are colorist. Like, I've witnessed, so I'm not going to gaslight darker skinned people and be like, oh, well, this and you know, yeah, it's just the way that you approach these things. Like, I'm not gonna say, like, yes, I've had people make assumptions or you know, maybe African centers, but I've seen certain things that are assumed, but to ignore the actual primary system of harm, and as far as how colorism does impact darker skinned people, especially how it impacts darker skinned women, I'm not gonna act like that's not a real thing, like, you know, or like I don't know. So I think that's what I just don't understand. Like, you know, like how you just can't put your own personal experience to the side for like 10 seconds and focus on the care and the harm that somebody else is speaking on before it's like, well, what about what I see? You know, or what about what I experience? You know, I don't get that. Like, I just don't.
And I think you're right on. I, again, not that you're doing this or any of us, but my concern again is just as well, just in general, my general approach to how anyone engages their identity, that there is a revolutionary form of them all. And specifically in terms of the African diaspora, my point would be all of them have pathways that lead African people back to some solidarity and attempt as a diaspora to work towards some sort of liberation. So yeah, I'll just leave it. Just leave it there. Where else would you like to go next?
Let's see. I mean, I guess, like I said, we can look at, I mean, some of the stuff has been repeated already, even within the chat, but I'm trying to think to myself, like, what do I guess I even need to show as far as certain.
And I don't know. I generally, you know, I know, you know, sometimes it changes. Generally target the roughly 2 hours, and I know we're at an hour and a half, so I don't know how you are with your time and energy, but just wanted to be mindful of that. And then just for your sake, for you, for Dr. Winkler and anyone else, this is not meant to be a one-off exhaustive conversation. So you can come back, we can have more of these. Again, I would like to talk with you more about some of your other work and as well, and follow up about your one woman play, etc. So and I often just say that again to remind myself to be less anxious about trying to get everything done properly and perfect in any given moment. Like we can always come back. But yeah, go ahead.
And you know, like I said, I think I'll just re-emphasize some of the things more so in this slide, because I was gonna play some stuff from Dr. Dennis, but I feel like I've either already referred to it or there's already been something in the chat that went back to it. So I'm just like, let me finish making my point, because I wanted to talk about you know, like I said, the other framework of African womanism. But yeah, I think I do out of the two, I prefer African womanism over Africana womanism. And I think Dove, I think this is, I wouldn't say it's bad. I just think it has its blank spots. I do think the African centeredness of it still doesn't take account from like, how do we get to, I guess, this, she's talking about this balance of Ma'at and ground, and she talks about the ancient Kemetic principle. And, you know, there's you know, cosmology that's, you know, incorporated into here that I do, you know, I like the spiritual stuff kind of, sort of, you know, I know this is the atheist. You know?
It's all good. I like it too. That's what I'm saying. I like the African centered approach, even to spirit, to spirituality and you know.
I think the older I get, though, and the deeper I get in my political grounding, like the more I do just start to be like, you know, more borderline atheist in some ways. Of like, even a discussion I was in this past weekend, they were talking about something. They was like, but there's a spiritual component. I was like, oh, shut up. Like, y'all, like,
I admit I increasingly struggle with it too. And that's why I really have, this is in part why I've amended my approach to this point about identity, that I don't want to, on some level, I don't want to keep having arguments with people about their particular approach. I just want them to focus on finding that pathway to some revolutionary behavior. Yeah. So if you believe in ancient Kemet, word, I'm good with it. I love it. I've studied a lot of it. I love it. You know, but it needs to get us to a certain point in this world. So yeah.
I think that it is cool, and it is cool how she was able to, you know, combine the political with the spiritual, which is somewhat what we see missing in a lot of these African-centered communities. Sorry, I'm gonna have to pause because my battery is dying and I don't want it to cut off. Sorry, I just realized that, like, you know, I don't. So I'm gonna grab my charger. Sorry.
All right.
I'll be right back.
Okay, no problem. No problem.
Step away and grab my charger really quick.
Oh, okay. So just while Cherie is doing that, I'll just ask everybody to, again, like, share, subscribe, support however they would like the platform. I will put the links to everything in the show description, and so that folks can follow up on all of what has been discussed here and watch in full the videos that have been referenced here as well. And did just schedule, I haven't put it up yet, but since I got a second here, Sudeep and I will be reconvening our Donut King series on July. Let's see, for first Renee is going to join me on the 22nd, next Wednesday, for our discussion of Loving. So speaking of biraciality, the Loving film, about the, you know, which is, you know, we're going to discuss that. And then Sudeep and I on the 30th are going to, oh, is this not even showing up? It doesn't even show up because it's the green screen. But it's We Are Each Other's Liberation, Black and Asian feminist solidarities. So there's going to be an overlap with some of the discussion from today, because some of the contributors to this collection come out of the Combahee River Collective. So, you know, you have Rachel Kuo, who we've talked about, Beverly Guy Sheftall. Some folks will recognize that name. Tamara Nopper is in this book as well, someone I've come across over the years, a brilliant Asian scholar. So we're going to be talking about There were some other, who are the bigger names that were somewhere? Tamara's in here. Rachel Cool. Anyway, so we're gonna be dealing with more of that. So come on back for that as well. And Cherie is back. So welcome back.
Sorry
and
about
I'll
that.
put your presentation back up.
Yeah. So I thought that this was cool. I thought, like I said, to me, the limitations were, because I'm somebody who, I used to be Hotep down. So I was deep into my Ma'at stuff. Like 2016, if I was out here, like stuffing crystals up my hoo-ha and all that other stuff. So, it's... I know, Jay, I know how you are about, like...
Don't mind me. I'm just old and falling apart. Don't mind me.
Like I said, I come from a stand-up background where, like, I have this whole joke about, my Dr. Staby diet, crystals up the cooch era, like, and that whole thing. But one of the things that I like I said, on a cosmology side, I was, I was more always into the Ifa tradition as well, and this kind of focuses more on Ma'at. And I kind of, get more into that towards the end of the presentation, where there are even kind of like African-centered, things that stand out to me, even on the Ifa tradition, where you have the Orishas, where there are different Orishas that I think give a broader example of what African femininity can look like, and how I identify with the Orisha Oya. I was never initiated into Ifa, but when I was close or teetering, I was teetering. I pulled a feather once, when I was teetering with that, they would always say my head was Oya. But she, to me, has a lot of elements when it comes to her that I think embody, to me, what people would call feminists, so that was one thing that kind of, I kind of went back and I looked more into her, and I can go to that slide later, I guess. But that's one thing that I do think is interesting. But I think for her is the approach to gender, because even like I said earlier, when Dr. Dennis was saying only a woman can be an Africana womanist, and that to me was a bit limiting. But I think with Nadab, she talks about African womanism and how it's a man and female thing, and both can identify as such, which I think is, is a bit more in alignment with my beliefs. And even when
can I just jump in real quick? Sorry to cut you off, but I just, to your point about your criticism of who can be, only a woman can be, just last night, and I didn't read all the articles, but I just went on Google Scholar and was just looking, something I actually tend to do from time to time. I actually kind of enjoy doing this is without reading all the articles, just put in a subject topic area and start researching what has been written recently. And there was an endless really amount of articles published just in the last 10 years, whose abstracts I was just looking at. So I don't pretend to have read them all or to, but they were there's a lot of research on, again, pre-colonial Africa and who was a woman, who was a man, when and where, when are they both?
Yeah.
When are they? I mean, there's all, so yeah, I was just like, and again, I was like, wow, yeah. So go ahead.
I think, especially with this, I like that she pushes that. To me, Nadab pushes that whole idea, because she talks about the African mother, but she doesn't say that that's a gender explicit thing. She says the men and the women should be looked at as like the African mother, should have these values of like, of caregiving. And it's not that, and like I said, I don't even know if it's as strong written as it is when I watched her lecture. But I know when she speaks about it, she makes it an emphasis because even I guess she knows like how people may see it in writing is like her saying things like mother, her talking about the family and these things that people will look at it as solely these are attributes that the women should have. But she said explicitly in the lectures that I've watched of her, said that this is a characteristic that both men and women should have, is identifying with the African mother, the culture barrier.
And it sounds like Joy James a little bit in her Captive Maternal, right? Where she also says the same thing, that this is not gender specific in terms of the maternal. But yeah,
so I just find it, like I said, to me, it's more radical than Africana womanism, where it just talks about like, being in, conversation or whatever with the male and still kind of focusing more on what the woman has to do or attributes. But I think that this to me seems more in alignment with radical thought, where we're talking about it gives it just gives more of a diverse look of like what malehood. And that was my biggest thing, is that I don't think that Africana womanism really calls anything or any shift of thought for men or people that are, cishet or male identifying, or, it doesn't really call for like a shift of mind or thought for them, where I feel like Nadav's African womanism does call for those things. But the only thing I will say is, to me, I still think you need some sort of decolonial effort that I think radical Black feminist thought attributes to, with the beginning of the pattern of how do we get to like a Ma'at, or how do we get to like these sort of away from these colonial ways of viewing gender. I think that it still does calls for like some interrogation with Black radical feminist thought to kind of get to these, like, to me, I see this as like a landing, but I still don't think it's having this alone, I don't think is enough to get a person there. I think there needs to be actual, like I said, looking at things. I feel like, so I think it can, to me, this can go in conjunction with Black. I don't think this counteracts, and even Nadav may disagree with me, I'm not sure. But to me, I think this can go in conjunction with Black radical feminist thought. And that's why I, came up with my thing called the Bambaraism, that came from, the cultural worker Toni came from Bambara. I felt like she has a quote from a book, from the book that she wrote called The Black Woman, that her and others contribute to. And I feel like, to me, that's kind of how if I had to call myself a thing, like I said, I don't have to call myself a feminist, a radical Black feminist ever in my life, but I would still look into the scholarship of Black radical feminists before me and the things that I align with, along with somebody like a Nadav that has a different framework. But if I had to do it, I would say Bambaraism, because I think her thing is culture. And that's my whole thing, is that, as a cultural worker, culture is political. And so with this, I'm not saying that we get these things and all of a sudden, capitalism ends, all of a sudden colonialism ends, all of a sudden I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is we have to create a culture within our own grassroots movements, within our families, within our own communities, that allows these things to be interrogated in order for us to all come together. So that's, my, biggest thing.
And is that how is there, to put a finer point on it, is there a working definition of Bambarism?
Yeah, I have it kind of in the beginning.
Because I think that's pretty dope to
yeah, like I said, one thing I will say is I'm happy, he challenged me to come up with like my own thing. But like I said, I got it from this statement here because I felt like I align with the heart of this statement, where it's like, yes, keep the big guns on the real enemy. Men have got to develop some heart and some sound analysis to realize that when sisters get passionate about themselves, their direction, it does not mean they're readying up to kick men's ass. They're readying up for honesty. And women have got to develop some heart and sound analysis so they can resist the temptation of buying peace with their man with self-sacrifice and posturing. The job regarding roles is to submerge all breezy definitions of manhood, womanhood, or reject them all out if you're not squirmish about being called a neuter, until realistic definitions emerge through commitment to Blackhood. And to me, that's the heart of it, to me, is this statement, because I feel like this all comes down to a commitment to Blackhood, whatever version of Blackhood you, whether it's Black nationalism, pan-africanism, new Africanism, whatever you want to call it. These things have to be addressed. And I think it calls on men to like understand that when women do this, like it's not an attack on men, and for women not to feel like they have to water down or they have to self-sacrifice in order to have these conversations. So that's the heart of it. But yeah, what I would say is it's a framework that is a commitment to Black unity, that addressing the triple oppression Black women experience through race, class, and gender simultaneously. It centers Black women's struggles, both systemic and interpersonal, while aiming to unite Black men and Black women culturally to demolish dominant political systems of white, hegemonic, imperialist, capitalist, colonial patriarchy. It is theoretical, political, cultural movement. It takes its name and aiming from Bambara's insistence that Black men and women must move beyond divisive, reactionary, ego-driven definitions of manhood and womanhood and towards something more demanding and honest and a shared commitment to collective Black survival and transformation. And I guess, like I said, if I had to pull from it, I would say, like I did, and I haven't read everything from Claudia Jones, but studying her life and getting more aware of her story has helped me kind of be able to see that you can fight these three things at once. So I would say she's an example of that. I would say, Combahee River Collective is an example of that. And I would also say I see values of African womanism that come from that. But yeah, so to me, that's kind of how I would define it.
Now listen, that's called my boy. You know nothing about that.
Enjoy. I like that.
Yeah, and there's probably even, like I said, it's not limited to just them, because even Joy James, from the stuff that I've seen, like, I think she kind of, feeds into that too. And like I said, I'm not saying that people.
Wait, say that part again. I'm sorry. What I missed that because I was starting to talk over you.
James, her analysis leans into what I would classify as Bambaraism too. I was saying I think she has a lot of great thoughts and wordings and things that I think help with this development as well too. And I don't necessarily know she would call herself a feminist. So this isn't a call of like, oh, you have to identify as that, or you have to say that is what you are. My thing of that, sorry, I'm trying to get to a specific page and talk, but okay, no, this is the end. Sorry, I'm trying to go back. I don't know why I'm stuck on this page when I'm reading the back. Okay. Yeah. So so I think there's a lot of people that can go under this, but I just think, like I said, if I don't ever call myself a feminist again, I only refer to myself as a Bambarist, if I'm still referring and saying certain terms that trigger you to say, oh, scary feminist lady, then it's like, I feel like I'm stuck here, where it's just like, so it just is kind of like, is it the terms, is it the framework, or is it the conversation? I think that's something that we all have to wrestle with. And then, like, these are some people that I feel like are already doing some of this, or, we've been pulling from this, where there's, element of all these things, so yeah, and like I said, I don't have to necessarily go too deep in everything, but that's just kind of how I would, I would conclude it as far as creating our own terminology. But like I said, I think what tends to happen is like the very argument, even if I say, well, hey, there is a culture, there is, something. Oh, you know what? I forgot to do one last thing. I'm so sorry.
You good.
Even when I talk about this, as far as dialectically, because like one of the biggest things I think that Dr. Dennis was leading to was like, and a lot of men cis hetero men will lean into this idea of, well, Black men or patriarchy wasn't made to benefit Black men, which it wasn't, and so therefore we should not even be a part of this discussion of patriarchy. And I kind of broke it down dialectically, and I used that episode of Saturdays with Renee because I'm still understanding how do you frame like the whole things of dialectical materialism, but I attempted to do this you know, after watching that episode with the dear comrade, I'm blanking out on his name.
Alchemy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I attempted to do that, but yeah, because that is the core contradiction of, you know, like it was patriarchy was, you know, created, you know, in a sense for white men, and it was made to lock black men out of this patriarchal power, but they also are then also handed this ideology of patriarchy to be a provider, a protector, a dominant masculine figure, without being given the material conditions to fulfill it, and then are punished by a system when they can't, and also punished when they try to claim it by force. And that this antagonizing contradiction is that white supremacist patriarchy was constructed in direct opposition to black male autonomy. Their marginalization is a feature, not a bug. The system does not intend to empower black men. And so that creates this kind of sequencing trap, where, you know, like I said, where even though it's not made for you, like these two things can still happen simultaneously, where black men are victims of patriarchy in a larger sense. They can also still use their agency to reproduce patriarchal harm within their communities, and that neither side cancels out each other. And so I think that's something to like sit with, and you know, we're like, even me, like as a woman, like patriarchy definitely wasn't made to benefit me, but I can still benefit from patriarchy. Like, and that's a thing. And I think addressing that allows me to even understand how it keeps going. I can benefit from somebody thinking I'm attractive and wanting to, you know, move out their seat for me, hold open all the doors for me, offer to pay for this and that. I can benefit, and a lot of women do, and then it keeps the system going where it's like, no, we should want men to pay for this and bend over backwards, you know, and they should only be seen as these providers and protectors, and we shouldn't want them to be anything more than that, because we can benefit off of. But that doesn't also mean that it becomes in the same breath extremely harmful in a way that a lot of women can be punished because of the very things that certain women who benefit from patriarchy can benefit from. And so I think it's having that acceptance of like, you know, I can, and there, and the honest contradiction is like, I do, like, I'm not gonna lie, like I'm, you know, in practice of, you know, with even my partner, of how do I, you know, open up the scope of how gender roles look. Like we're always, you know, somewhat talking about that, even with the man that I'm with and whatnot. But we still fall into patriarchal norms, you know, and I can recognize these things when we do fall into that. And that doesn't mean like, you get what I'm saying? Like, therefore, since I get some of these patriarchal benefits, that therefore it's a great system, you know, like, if you get what I'm saying, we're like, you know, there can be the, you know, I've paid for stuff on dates and stuff, but the majority of the spending and going, you know, is him. And that doesn't mean like, oh, well, you know, I'm actually benefiting from this certain thing, so therefore I can't criticize it, or therefore it doesn't still leave room for others to be extremely harmed by it, you know, systemically. So I think, yeah, if that makes sense, but yeah.
No, I think it does. And I think if certainly if interpreted with a certain political frame, what you've presented and are presenting, it I think informs a very ultimately communal approach and understanding of what's going on with and how to properly respond to it. In other words, again, as I've oversimplified it for my own purposes, what I've seen you lay out today very much addresses my concern about how any of us address ourselves to any of our preferred identifiers. So if and correct me if I'm wrong, but the point being that however one wants to interpret gender roles, sexuality, the point has to be to bring us to a revolutionary understanding of the context that's creating all of this, and how that context produces all these particular problems that do need their own forms of specific response, without limiting our analysis or understanding to that specific response.
Yeah.
And anyway, I hope that made sense, but that's at least how I interpret
I
it.
also wanted to emphasize really quick, the main thing I'm saying is conditional patriarchy. I think that was the big part that I think a lot of it's conditional patriarchal benefits. It's not to say that Black men are creating this system, they're the leaders of the enforcement of this system, but it's understanding that there's conditional benefits, and that because of those conditional benefits, we have to address these things overall and how they impact our communities, our spaces, and stuff like that. So that was a thing too that I guess, and even me, like I said, it's conditional. Like, I am oppressed overall by patriarchy, but I can't have these conditional benefits within, the way I enter, with even in the way I'm perceived. Like, I can't deny the conditional benefits with like the way I may be perceived as somebody that's smaller, that's lighter skin, that all of these things, like there's a conditional benefit under this patriarchal, colorist, anti-Black system that I have. And that doesn't mean that, therefore I never receive racism, I never receive harm, I never, I can't speak on these things, but I still understand my conditional benefits within these systems,
Right on. Cherie, I really appreciate this. This has been dope. Is there anything else? Again, I'm not rushing. I just want to make sure. Is there anything else you want to make sure we address or that you say or and again and are you all back tomorrow night with Dare to Struggle?
It's tricky right now, honestly. There's just so much happening with like all of us, scheduling wise. We do aim to like have some sort of meet and figure out like how we can do this, even if we have to do it every other week, but we're in the process of that. So I honestly don't know entirely. But yeah, I will say one more thing I did want to point out.
Sure.
And I even pointed this out in our email exchange, that I think one of the other things that I think frustrates me sometimes with how these conversations are set up, specifically on Dr. Dennis's channel, is like he'll put feminism, manosphere, ADOS, FBA, and make it like we're just one big group. And I think that to me is a little bit intellectually dishonest, because I think if we're going to say something like manosphere, the correct context would be divestors, because that would be the kind of like female extreme of manosphere. Like, manosphere isn't a liberal framework, it's full-blown right-wing framework. Like, like we can call out the liberalism of feminism anytime. I'm one to vouch for it, but I think setting it up like that is a part of the issues of why it makes it hard for women to have these honest, or anybody, femme identifying, to have these honest conversations when you're already setting it up as anything possible with feminism is equal to an ADOS, an FBA, a manosphere, framework. Like, I just think it would be the logical or intellectually honest thing would be to say divestors, manosphere, FBA, ADOS. If you want to just talk about the liberalism of feminism, you can do that. But I just think setting it up like that automatically puts people in a tough place to talk about anything that people can point out and say, that sounds like it's from feminist scholarship, therefore it's the equivalent of FBA, ADOS, and manosphere. So that's something else that I wanted to like point out that I think is a huge problem to me, of like how this is being presented, and it's very harmful, as well.
Yeah, I think I understood what he was trying to do, and but I understand your criticism that in the video in question, the in title and approach, it did lump feminism, ADOS, FBA, manosphere into a what he was doing was saying that all, as I understood it, that all of these groups suffer from, or identities, preferred identities, suffer from an overemphasis on those identities, and with an insufficient understanding and approach and concern for the African family and the Black nation and community. but I don't agree that, I mean, and I'm wildly biased against particularly the reverse hashtags and the hashtag community, the manosphere community and all of that, in a way that I'm similarly biased against the broad, undefined, white, liberal feminist category. So that's why, I would have humbly preferred in that instance that he focus more specifically on calling out. In fact, we did talk a little bit, and I about that in particular, and I thought it was inappropriate to compare Black women as a category and an identity to FBA, ADOS, and manosphere. I think I understood what he was trying to do with that, and to make a point about how people approach these ideas and categories. And I don't entirely disagree with his criticism in terms of how people approach these identities with very conservative, backwards approaches that are not concerned with African community or family. But I think that there does need to be a clarity and a specificity around particularly Black women and feminism as engaged by Black women, particularly revolutionary Black women in the diaspora. So I don't think I was very clear in that quick summary. So that's why I keep saying as to myself and everyone else, this is not the end of the conversation, and there will be many more opportunities to continue it. So any mistakes that I've certainly made, we will have a chance to correct in the future. I will make sure that the links to what Cherie has been talking to are in the show description here, and I look forward to more. I think I really appreciate this discussion. This has been dope.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Like I said, I've really, you've been so and this is me fanning out, and I know you don't like all this, but you've been very, very, such a huge part in me being politicized, becoming radicalized, was this, understanding class and everything. I have to give you, your credit for just, the platforms that you've gone on, your book, everything that you put out there intellectually has been a huge part of my political development and understanding. So I do just want to take the time to give you flowers.
I appreciate that. And, Cherie, as a fair-skinned, cis-het, biracial, no one suffers like me. So I feel it's been my duty to do what I can to give back to all of you out here who suffer far less than I do, but still need some help and some analysis. So I'm just trying to contribute. All right. So I appreciate you recognize that. Folks, do please check again the links in the show description at some point, but more specifically Cherie's work on Black Liberation Media with Dare to Struggle, Dr. Shakur and Geechee Yaw. And until next time, I can't wait to talk again and to see this play, so salute. Thank you very much.
See you.
Peace. All right, everybody, please do whatever you can. Show Cherie some love and like, comment, and do all those things. And thank you very much for joining us today. And again, I look forward to more conversation. Please make sure you have the bell rung, check your subscription, make sure you do all of that with Black Liberation Media as well. And so you don't miss all the stuff coming up. And as always, peace. Only if you're willing to, you know what I got to do though, before we get out of here. Since my book got brought up, before we get out of here, we're going to, you know what I got to do. So peace, everybody. Only if you're willing to fight for it, as Fred Hampton used to say. And I'll see you next time with more I Mix What I Like.
We should support Black businesses. We got to support Black. My buddy Jared Ball, Dr. Ball, who is at Morgan State, talks about this myth of Black buying power. Another brother who teaches at Duke University, Sandy Darity, says, we can't pool our money together and using that, buy our way out of oppression.
Right.
This is
never buy your way out.
You can't buy your way out. We can't create enough millionaires in a capitalist society. It just can't. Nick, as much money as you do or don't have, you can't write a check for everything you worth and free us.
Right.
It's not possible in a capitalist society.
Right.
And what did you sacrifice?
Calm, kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago for which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, have set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.